Okay, long-term profitability. In this Q&A, a question I'm particularly passionate about. Okay, thanks for asking such an important question there, Neil. It's one that goes widely ignored by the masses, I think, and that is a huge, terrible, foolish mistake. It's something that if you look back over the blog for a longer period of time, back towards when I started, and some of the very early YouTubes even, I talked about quite a lot. So the fact that you're fully aware of this already is great. That is the hardest part, I think, for most people, because many don't realise it, and if they do realise it, they aren't really willing to accept when they're doing it, let alone pick themselves up on it and sort of seek solutions for it. So that's probably the number one reason, psychologically anyway, that people fail in trading, I think. So the thing to say about this, I think, is psychologically everyone's probably got this subconscious level or level of sort of self-worth, if you like, or whatever you want to call it, where it becomes more of a barrier once you start to reach it. You seem to become the barrier yourself. Well, I certainly did once I sort of started to reach around about £10 a race, and I think it was, at the time, it was wild, it was bizarre. I would think, why am I doing this to myself? But as soon as I get to this £10 a race figure, I start over trading, taking bigger risks, deviating away from what I know to be successful in the markets. And I pin it all back on psychology and what you're talking about here in this question. So the way I got around that was to continually be aware and sort of try and train myself. And I did a few crazy things en route to do that. One of them was I had a large piece of bungee, and I used to ping myself really hard with it when I'd make a stupid mistake. A bit like reinforcement and avoidance, I think it's termed. But like when you teach a dog, you give it a treat if it's good, or you might tell it off if it's naughty. I started doing things like that to myself to try and get around this. I wouldn't necessarily advise it, but if you really die hard and you really want to go down that route, then give it a go. By the time your leg's bleeding from pinging yourself with a bungee so many times, you kind of tend to stop it. But it takes a little bit of time, is the answer to this, really, and it takes repetition and just consistent repetition of that behaviour, correcting yourself, being aware, going through the routine. And the longer you can go without breaking that cycle and doing something silly like going in play or staking up larger than you needed to just because you was losing, or any of those kind of mistakes, the longer you can go without making those mistakes, the easier it becomes. The downside being, it is a process that takes a fair amount of time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You're not going to be cured tomorrow. We're all human, we all make these mistakes, and to get out of that routine, particularly if you've come from a gambling background, it may be a bit harder. Now, I know some people find it a lot harder than others. I did find it quite a lot of torment for quite a while. But aside from this, the biggest tip I can give is to rearrange your own personal environment around you, because if you change the environment that you're actually sat in when you're decision making and when you're trading, then it's easier to do the right thing, is what I'm trying to say. So I know someone commented on the YouTube channel recently, and they said that their wife coming in, interfering, causes them dramas, and they get frustrated, and that is just typical of this kind of behaviour, I think, because if you don't fix that environment, then you're going to get wound up subconsciously. You're going to do some different things. You're going to deviate away from the plan. It's just, it comes back to emotion at the end of the day. The whole thing comes back to emotion and feeling, and subconsciously whether you feel like you should be winning that much. So reinforce the good stuff. Keep yourself hyper aware as much as you possibly can, and if you need to, reprimand yourself to avoid making the same mistake again and again. Obviously it's fine to make mistakes, we all make them, it's part of the game, you're going to lose at points, but to continually make the same mistakes for no real particular reason is not ideal, it's less than ideal. We don't want to be doing that. But unfortunately, there's no magic beans on this one, there's no golden bullet, there's no hack or cheat or something like that you can do to get you out of this one, other than good old repetition, good execution, sticking to your plan, and not making the same mistake too many times over. The more you continually do this, the easier it becomes, because obviously, like mindset, that kind of stuff, consistency has to take place in your mind before it can elsewhere in the markets. And so, you know, control the environment, control your feelings as much as you possibly can, control the routine and reinforcement and everything that you're doing, and keep that repetition going on a positive level. Keep professional, treating it like like it's an actual job, and eventually you iron out the creases and life does get a lot easier. However, that doesn't mean that you won't ever make a mistake again, because that unfortunately is part of being human, along with manual trading.